I'll start from where we last spoke. Now, the thing is, we live in Europe, and there's people in America, Australia. Well, basically, we are in the West. We go to school, and whichever country we go to in the West, they're teaching us a similar history. Yes, and this similar history is not only found in the West, but it's actually found in Eastern countries like India, Southeast Asia, where else in many African countries, Latin America and Russia, except for one place, which is very serious, in the Middle East. So now why does the world have one history and then the Middle East has another? Now, some people will say, China's got a different history, so has India. Not really, because China and India, their history matches the timeline of the West. Yeah, it will agree with the information that's in the West. For example, they'll say the printing press was made in Europe in the 15th century, around then, but printing and paper came from China before then. So they will agree. They're not going to exactly be opposite each other, except for a few things that they've left there to show, hey, it's a different history, blah, blah, blah. So now there's a similar thing in India. Yeah, you'll find that they've got their ancient Aryan civilization and the Vedas. And then whatever's in the Vedas, the way it's passed down, it will match the, official world timeline in history. But now one place does not match: the Middle East. Now, we in the West, no matter what, the moment you mention Islam or the Quran, no. Okay, then sit there accepting the pathetic history we've got. That's what we can do. Yes. So now nobody wants to have a look at it. Yes. Apart from Anatoly Fomenko came along. He's a professor at Moscow State University. He came along with a very huge team of hundreds of people who were helping him do the research. Yeah. And what he did was he put down an alternative timeline, and he said, hey, look, this is clearly a lie. We can see it is. So is that, so is this, and so is that, so is that. For example, he showed Eastern Europe, Northeastern Europe, that's like Scandinavia, from Germany all the way through to, Russia, Ukraine, and all those regions. And he turned around and said, hey, it's a bit ridiculous that we're talking about European and Christian history when almost the majority of the coins that we found here and the artifacts and many other things, and mysteriously, all of them have got Arabic writing on them, the majority. So nobody's talking about it. People will walk into museums, they haven't got a clue what that is. They're having a look and they don't really know what it is. So he pointed that out. Then he turned around and said, hey, we're going through all these kings that are in Russian history, and the timeline matches the Old Testament history, similar to what the official history says, but they've modified the names and things like that. And he shows them on graphs. And he shows, hey, the kings of Russia are similar to the ones in the Old Testament. Yeah. And then he shows that the similar timeline is used for the kings of England, for the kings of the Roman Empire, for the kings of the Byzantine Empire in Istanbul, for the kings of many other nations. He shows, hey, they just copied it from nation to nation and they just changed the names. Yeah. I've pointed this out in my books. That's a great discovery that Anatoly Fomenko has made. So now many people have made YouTube videos, and in Tartaria groups, they call this previous empire, they call it Tartaria, because some maps call it Tartaria. Anatoly Fomenko, yeah, and some other people call it Tartaria or Russia or the Mongol Empire. Now, there's many Muslims in Europe, in the Western world, who were born in the West, who've been brought up with Western history. Yeah, they call it the Caliphate. Yes, the Islamic Empire. Yeah, and there's so many people call it the Kingdom of God because it matches the Old Testament kings, King David and others who come after him. It matches the timeline. So now we know that the Old Testament is similar to all these histories, but in England they'll call it King Alfred the Great. For the Eastern Romans, the Byzantines, they'll call him Heraclius. They've just changed the names, similar stories for all their timelines, and they've done that throughout the world. But now Anatoly Fomenko went one step further. And what he did was he went through the Kremlin Museum of Armory, of weapons and everything else, and kings' crowns and many other things. And he turned around and showed, hey, the majority of these things, the bishops, crowns and everything else, he went through them all and he said, hey, they've mysteriously got Arabic writing on them. Not normal Arabic, but the Arabic that's in the Quran. And he pointed this out. And he said, and they are telling us, Russia, which ruled, huge parts of Eastern Europe, we're talking Poland, Ukraine, going into Finland and many other places. And they're saying, hey, this was a Christian nation. Kiev and Rus, they call it. And they say, the Greek Orthodox Church went there from Istanbul, the Byzantines, and they give us some bogus history. And he's saying, if it was Christian, then why do we have all these objects here, the entire majority, with Arabic writing and writing from the Quran? And now we've got all these Tartaria groups that opened up in the last 20 years after Anatoly Fomenko wrote his books. And they started off from there. And now all these groups, you can tell there's something wrong in them. They're all publishing pictures and many other things saying, hey, look at this, look at that, history's a lie. But there's almost a complete silence. Nobody wants to mention what Anatoly Fomenko said and what he's shown. Nobody wants to talk about it. They're all saying, look at these great, amazing buildings. But nobody is, and they're all saying, hey, yes, it's Tartaria, it's the previous civilization. But nobody is turning around and saying, hey, it was Arabic. It had the Arabic Quran. Now, we've got that problem in the East, but now let's go to the West. We've got another problem here because we've got the Knights Templar. And what they've told us about the Knights Templar is that the Knights Templar were parts of the Crusades and they were fighting these so-called Muslims. But then we've got down from records, which, the dates cannot be verified. Anatoly Fomenko and others have said that these records are more recent, probably 200-300 years old. But historians claim that they're many centuries old. But they still say that the Knights Templar had a leader with a beard who was called Muhammad, who they call Baphomet or Mehmet or Muhammad in English, modern English. So now we've got another problem. Who the hell were the Knights Templar? So we've got, and these Knights Templar, they were supposed to be financing all these great, amazing Gothic churches and other amazing buildings in Northwestern Europe, like France, Germany, Holland, England, and many other places.
Right, that's the prime cover story, yes.
Yeah, then when we look at these Gothic churches, the most amazing and the biggest ones are supposedly in Spain. But in Spain, there's that much Islamic history that it's been difficult to hide because Spain is economically backwards. Eastern Europe is economically backwards. As you know, the Iron Curtain only fell recently, in the last 30 years. So that's why the cleanup operation to delete history has taken longer. And the land is a lot more bigger. So in Western Europe, they've managed to delete, destroy, and do many other things to, buildings, modify them and everything. So now when we talk about these Gothic churches, there's many of them in China. There's all these Tartari groups. Nobody seems to mention them. They're all over China. They're all over China. You'll find them in India. So the thing is, for example, Ahmedabad city, I went to visit one of them. And it's like a great, amazing Gothic style building. And they're telling us, oh no, that's a Muslim church, a mosque. That's what they're telling us, saying it was built in the Middle Ages. But then when you have a look at the full building, everything, you think it's identical to many buildings that you see in Western Europe. So now in Western Europe, we've got Spain. The biggest Gothic cathedral in the world is over there. And that is supposed to be a mosque that was just converted into a church. So then that raises the question, what exactly are Gothic cathedrals? Then we've got Anatoly Fomenko pointed out that Vienna Cathedral, Vienna was supposed to be like the heart of the Holy Roman Empire. And they said that, hey, these so-called Muslim Turks, they came through Hungary, you should know that through Hungarian history, and then they invaded Vienna.
Yes,
twice.
It's always the great story, at least 2 times, and that's usually how they give the reasoning for why there would be cultural influence. Yes.
Now we've got a problem. This so-called Muslim army that came has got Christian crosses on their flags, as well as the moon and star. And then they're attacking the city. And then we've got documents that are supposed to be from the 15th century, but they could be later. It could have actually happened in the 16th or 17th century, yeah, because they played with the timeline. But we've got the Gothic cathedral there, and on top of the Gothic cathedral, from over 100 years, there was a star and a moon there, and then it was removed in the 17th or 18th century, which is very suspicious. Yeah, and they're telling us that's a Gothic cathedral. Then that raises the question of what is the function of these Gothic cathedrals? Many people are saying cathodes, you know, that are found in microwaves and many other things. Cathode, cathedral, is a similar word. Now, when you go deeper into it, they're telling us that after the 15th century, the printing press, they printed millions of books in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries. Yes, before Napoleon Bonaparte. And most of the books were in languages like Latin and French. Now, the thing is, so they're printing thousands and thousands of books in Renaissance Italy, Machiavelli, many other books. Now, we've got a problem. Nobody speaks this Italian language until the 1850s. Oh, even then, only 1% of the people could speak it, only a little bit. You know, like when you've got foreigners who come into Europe who could just about speak a few words, you know. And then they're telling us we've got all these great libraries in Europe. Go and have a look, amazing libraries with Italian works, Renaissance, blah, blah, blah. Yes, but we've got people who don't speak Italian. Even by 1950, yes, they turn around and say around an estimated 20% of the people in Italy could speak Italian by 1950. So what about all these books? They all seem like forgeries. Then we've got the same problem in France. Apparently, during the French Revolution, yeah, 90% of the people in France did not speak French. So, and they're telling us they already had these thousands and thousands of French books. En français, oui, liberté, égalité, fraternité, la révolution. Well, now we've got a problem. Were they printing all these books for ghosts? They're telling us that the Bible was translated into French in the 15th, 16th century and in Italian. Who are they translating Bibles for if people don't even speak the language? Can you see we've got these problems? Yes. So that means that you know, we can't actually find a Christian history. So now when we go back to Spain, we've got the Cathars and the Knights Templar north of Spain. The Cathars are in south of France and in Italy, and the Knights Templar are in West Germany, Holland, France, England. They're the dominant power. Yeah. And the Knights Templar are supposed to have been, you know, involved in building these cathedrals. And according to the official history, yes, they were known as the Knights of Christ of the Temple of Solomon. Yeah. And they were supposed to have these people who constructed these cathedrals for them. And those people were known as the Children of Solomon. Yes. Now, the thing is, everybody ignores the Quran. But the Quran turns around and says that Solomon had a group of people, and the Muslims called these people like the Children of Solomon. And these people were an invisible race of alien beings, and that they built these amazing buildings, huge buildings that had some form of technology, and that had boiling facilities to boil water, same like what we've got in power stations where they boil water in some nuclear power stations in other places. That's written in the Quran, but nobody's going to pay attention to that. Also, we've got, you look at Amsterdam. Now, you've got people who are posting things on TARTÁRIA groups and talking about saying, hey, it's obviously a joke that they used horses and donkeys to build thousands of kilometers of canals in Holland, right, and in the United States. So they know that. But nobody's having a look at what Anatoly Fomenko pointed out. He pointed out that the Quran actually states a different timeline in history compared to everybody else. Now, people might mention Anatoly Fomenko, he's just one man. And they might say that before him, there were people like Sir Isaac Newton. But Sir Isaac Newton's history has been falsified. We cannot verify his identity. But now we've got a problem. We've got 1/4 of the world who are so-called Muslims who are following a different timeline, who've got it in a book called the Quran. But mysteriously, the oldest Quran is from St. Petersburg in Russia. Yes. So, and that's in between the east and the west of the European continent, in the north. Yeah, and then we've got thousands of Arabic coins lying around in Northern Europe. So nobody wants to pay attention. Then the Quran makes a challenge to everybody, and it tells you, hey, yes, it challenges humanity, and it says, hey, they're telling lies about history. They're lying about this. They're lying about that. Nobody else is saying it openly. That book has been saying it. So therefore, when Donald Trump says Islam hates us, he wasn't referring to hates us, the people. He's referring to themselves, the leadership, because the Quran actually condemns them and said they're telling lies. Go and investigate. Other religions is based on belief. The Quran is not based on that. I'm not talking about modern Islam. Let's talk about the Quran as a historical document. Yeah, as a historical document, it says they're telling lies. These are the lies they've prepared. This is what you are going to find within their lies, etc. It tells you. Yeah, there's many things.
So if I may ask, just because it fits in, and I had recently seen the contributions by Michelle Gibson, and she's talking quite a lot about the Moorish Empire and the potential that, let's just say, there would be black-skinned people potentially as civilization builders as part of the real Native Americans that then got supplanted by modern Americans, whatever this may be.
There's many theories. There's many theories, and many people, yes, are talking about, and they talk about, for example, there's the Moorish. But now, if you've read my books, then when the Spanish went to the Philippines 500 years ago, they called that city Moorish city, Manila city. It was called the city of the Moors. Yes. So the definition of Moors can mean many things. Now, for example, many people, can you imagine in 1,000 years' time, they're trying to figure out our history today? Yeah. Now, many people will say that was a history dominated by the Europeans. But somebody else could turn around and say, no. It was, a great Chinese civilization because China is supplying all the goods for the last 30 years to the rest of the world. Yeah. So somebody else will say, no. It was the Soviets, because we in the West, we seem to think that, we're the majority. Yeah. But then the Soviets could say, hey, nah. Somebody else will say, no, there was another civilization called communism. So it will be debatable, and people will be arguing, was Venezuela and Hugo Chavez, was he a communist or was he a Democrat? Because he got elected, but he had socialist policies. So but then was Hugo Chavez black? Was he white? What was he? So these things can carry on going round. But if we it's like, for example, if we go to India, was India a white civilization or was it darker skinned? Now, that is a debate inside India itself, because in northern India, people have got lighter skin, that they look like, Mediterranean people. In southern India, they've got darker skin.
Yes.
That you could say that a lot of them look like Africans. So there is a huge war going on inside India itself, on blogs, on many posts. So now when people are talking about Moorish civilization, it's like there's people who are talking about Tartaria. Some people, Russian nationalists, will call it Russia. Other people are going to call it Tartaria because that's how they've seen it on maps that are found in Western Europe. Now, other people are going to call it the Caliphate, because they're from Muslim nations. Now, anybody there's not many people who follow the Torah or the Old Testament, they're going to say, no, it was the civilization of the kings of the Old Testament. Then there's going to be, right-wing Christians, if they're into the Tartarian subject, they're going to say it was the kingdom of God. So some people will call it Moorish. So we can call it many different things. But the main thing is there was a global civilization just 2 or 3 centuries ago. We can't define the exact moment.
Would one of the parts of the cover-up in modern history potentially include what we understand as the Ottoman Empire?
Oh, the Ottoman Empire, it's because it covers the Middle East. What happened there, that looks like one of the last stands of Tartaria.
Right.
I'll explain why. It's because if you go to Chechnya in Russia, that's next door to Iran, not far from Iran. It's in southern Russia. So we're talking it's very close to the Middle East. We are going to see Germanic people living there, Germanic tribes, and Scandinavian people living there. Yeah, which is not normal. And those people, if you go and talk to them, they're going to say, we only arrived here in the last 100 or 200 years. We ran from North and Western Europe. Now, if you go to Turkey also, you are going to see that up to 20% of the people are from Northwestern Europe. That they are going to tell you, we retreated from Western Europe, and they're mysteriously Muslims. Yes, so it means there must have been a huge Muslim presence, and they left. And the rest of the story of how Islam was destroyed in Western Europe is actually in my books. It's a long story. But let's get back to the Quran, because I'm sure you've seen my recent posts on Facebook.
Yes.
When I was about age 15, when I was age 10, I started reading the Bible, because I went to a private school where you've got to pay. You know, people call it an elite grammar school in England. So you start reading the Bible at the age of 10. Yeah, I practically read it all, finished it by 15. Now, when I finished it around age 15, I mysteriously bumped into, when I went to finished high school, it's the next stage, we call it college, or lycée en français. Yes, what happened is there, I met 2 Arabic people. And those 2 Arabic people, they introduced me to the Quran. So I thought, hey, I'm going to read it. Now, when I read that, what happened is it makes the challenge to you. And then it tells you something that's strange. And it says, hey, go out there and you're going to find a symbol there with the number 19. Yeah, it explains it, and I've put it in my books. Yeah, so I've been looking at that since, I've been age 15. So since then, I was able to figure out what's a scam, what's prepared, and what they're doing. Yes. So now the Quran actually says that there is a group of alien beings that lives on Earth, and they communicate with a certain group of humans. Yeah. And those humans are greedy, selfish, and people like that. Now, what they want, that alien group of beings, they want to control humanity, and they want humans to be, subservient to them, below them. Yeah, that they don't want humans to have their own independent thinking, independent mind, or their independence. That's what the Quran says. And it says, basically, it wants you to love them. Yeah. Now, in upper class English, somebody's going to call that worship them. Yeah, but in common English, it just means that they want you to love them, to believe them, to listen to them. That's it. So now the thing is, when you have a look at history, politics, the media, football, the major football players, the major singers, the major everything, whichever part of the world, whether they be Japanese or Chinese or Indian or Russian, you name it, Brazil, whichever country, you're going to find the strange number 19 somewhere in there. I'm sure you've seen my posts. That 19 in the data is ridiculous. The way that they're using it in history. Yes, it's just totally ridiculous. Like, I put on my Facebook profile showing that, hey, Martin Luther King, he made that speech, I Have a Dream, with huge crowds. But he wasn't famous originally. How did he become famous? They've said that he was arrested on the 19th of October, 1960. And then he was released, and his release was high profile because the media advertised it. And they say that John F. Kennedy, organized his release. Yes. So now the thing is, then the way when John F. Kennedy sends everything to Congress for this Martin Luther King, that's on the 19th, blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on and on. It's just a joke. It's just ridiculous the way that they're using the number 19 for here and there and everything like that. I don't know how to say it. People have got to actually read my books and go through it. It's like, for example, they say that for NASA, they've been using 1.9 billion or something per year. It's been costing them. It's just a joke. Have you been through the number 19 posts on my profile?
Yes, I looked at them. Yes, quite astounding.
Is it ridiculous?
How many references facts there are for each of those? Because it's not just 2 or 3, but it's plenty. I just like to briefly mention, as you spoke about Russia, although I don't know anything about it really, is that with Chechnya, weren't there also many types of like civil wars or supposed terrorists, which seem to be related to this history wars, if you know anything about it?
Okay, there's more. Let me explain to you. Most people don't realize what's going on in Chechnya, and not just Chechnya, Colombia, so-called terrorists. Yes, and where do you call it, in Afghanistan? What they've really been doing in those places, like, for example, they're saying that Afghanistan, huge drugs production. There's drugs being produced everywhere, even in Spain, you might not believe it, and in Italy, there's groups. Now, I don't know if you've had a look at the history of the 1970s in Italy. The government turned around and said there's terrorists, separatists, and there's the mafia in southern Italy. They advertised it. There was crime there, same like there's crime in anywhere else in the world. Now, what happened is because these nation states are new, they want to bring everybody under their control.
Right.
They can't do that if people are living in the countryside. Now, what the Quran says is that these people who are in power, they don't want you dead. They want you to love them. That's why they provide you entertainment. They provide you stories. When they tell you there's a disease, they want you to believe it. When they say this is a cure, they want not just to be your masters, they want you to love them. So it's not just about being a master, control. If it was about control, they'd totally make everyone into slaves straight away. It is not slavery. It is more about, you know, getting everybody
adoration or some energy exchange. That's a highly, I just want to point out, relevant point because it can explain a lot psychologically. You're right. With only control, they could have moved differently. There's something else going on for sure.
Yes. So now the thing is, nobody's stupid. It's ridiculous if somebody turned around and says, it's like I've shown it in my books. You could take a photograph in the morning and you'll see the position of the sun in the sky in one place. Then when you look at it in the afternoon, the position has moved. You could see the same thing with the moon. So we know things are moving. Now, if somebody turns around and says, oh no, they're just moving by accident, it's called a force in science. Yeah. They're talking rubbish. We know that somebody must have created these things and that's why they're moving. Yes. This is not a question of flat earth or round earth. It doesn't matter if the earth is moving or the sun. I'm trying to say there's movement. Now, for something to move, somebody has to make it move in the first place. That's how we know that everything's been created. So now the thing is, to do with the number 19, the Quran tells you you're going to find this. And then it says that there's 19 angels that are stood basically on the doorsteps of the fire of hell. Yeah. And then it warns you and says that when you find this, you will know who's speaking the truth. Yes. And I wrote my books first. I put the posts later, because if I put these number 19 things, you know, last year when I started writing, people won't know what it's about. I wrote about the history first so that then they can go through it. Yeah. But the other thing is, anybody who had the Quran anyway, already many years ago, would already know these things. I know these things not because I'm any more smart or intelligent or better than anyone else. It's because I read the Quran and it says, hey, go and have a look there. You'll find this, you'll find that. And that it's exactly how it said. That's what I found. And it said, hey, the timeline, hey, it was like this. Anatoly Fomenko had a look and said, hey, yes, it's true. It's a lie. It's a joke, this timeline in history. And then the Quran says, hey, these buildings were like this. This is the person who built them. This is how they constructed them. Now, in these TARTÁRIA groups, people are saying, hey, it's impossible. We know they couldn't have built this with horses and donkeys. But nobody is going back to somebody like Anatoly Fomenko, who made this subject famous all around the world. Everyone's ignoring it. Or maybe it's deliberate. Maybe a lot of the posts in these TARTÁRIA groups are now done by, agencies that are, with the world system. Basically, as you can see, it's just a joke. Yeah, I'll give you an example of World War I. Now, this will make you think, what the hell? Yeah, it's just going to make you think, what the hell? Let me just have a look now. The Battle of Amiens or Amiens. Yeah,
right.
It says that 19,000 Allied soldiers were killed or injured. Let's have a look. It just goes on and on. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous, the data. Somewhere in there, they'll have something that if it's not on the 19th of the month, then it will say somewhere to do with the number 19. Or Marilyn Monroe, what's her story? John F. Kennedy, yeah? What his oldest photo, yeah, or one of his oldest photo is while he was in Harvard team. He was the 19th player, yeah? John F. Kennedy organizes the release of that Martin Luther King. And then for Martin Luther King, oh, look at this. It's called the King Bill. And it was passed on October the 19th, 1983 for a national holiday law for Martin Luther King. It just goes on and on. Oh, yeah, the civil rights legislation that John F. Kennedy introduced in 1964 was introduced on the 19th of June. It's just ridiculous. You know, Marilyn Monroe, she sings, "Happy birthday to you, Mr. President," not even on his birthday, May the 19th. Oh, Marilyn Monroe, she does her first ever acting audition on the 19th. I forgot what date, but it just goes on and on. That if you have a look at it, you think it's just ridiculous. You know, it's just ridiculous. It goes on. Like, for example, we're told about the US, China and Taiwan, blah, 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 on the news. Then it turns around and says, the number of US troops after World War II in Taiwan reached its highest level in 1958 at 19,000 US troops. You'll find that in the media. So it just goes on and on and on. Like, for example, Trump orders the withdrawal of US forces from Syria on the 19th of December. You know, the big dates. The 9/11 Commission report, if you go through that, they say, September the 11th, the day began with 19 hijackers getting through a security checkpoint. That's the first sentence on the Commission report. Then it's going to turn around and say, then the next suspicious thing happened at 8:19 a.m. Flight attendants and passengers began reporting hijackings of the aircraft via airphone or whatever. That's the next thing. Then the next thing that happens in the 9/11 Commission report, it says airborne aircraft decided to take defensive action, but this did not come until 9:19 a.m. when a United Flight dispatcher, Ed Ballinger, took the initiative to begin blah, blah, blah. Can you see it? It's just ridiculous. This is the official US government report. Of course, nobody's bothered to read it, but it's got 19 all over it. Now, that report is what they're going to teach in schools in 50 years' time. That somebody could be doing an essay or a dissertation for it when they're age 15 in school saying, this is 9/11. That's what they're going to be reading. It's just a joke. 19 hijackers started it. Then it got reported of the hijack, 8:19 a.m. Then, what do you call it? Yes, airborne, they took defensive action, 9:19 a.m. It just goes on and on and on. It's just ridiculous. Like, for example, most people don't know the Nazca lines. You'll find this in many TARTÁRIA groups. They're going to say, it's so amazing. The Nazca lines in Latin America. We don't know who made them or how they made them, but look how suspicious it is. It covers an area of 19 square miles. That's what I mean. It just goes, it's just, and then it turns around and says the width of the lines are 33 centimeters. Now, the number 33 comes second after the number 19. Yeah, my book explains that. So it's like anybody who goes through that straight away will smell it. Yeah, will think, this is suspicious. You know, we'll understand, you know, a few things. You know, oh yeah, France, when they were talking about Fukushima nuclear power station, whatever scam, you know, Fukushima blowing up. Yeah, they turned around and said, France is now very worried. They've got 19 nuclear power stations. Oh, John F. Kennedy's history goes through it with the number 19. Jacqueline Kennedy, she died on May the 19th. You know, it just goes on and on and on. You know, oh yeah, then his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, was assassinated by a man who was born on March the 19th, and that's got 19 written all over it. Blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on. That it just sounds like a joke. I really don't know how else to say it. Oh yeah, for example, the Boxer Rebellion, 1902 in China, 19,000 soldiers, yeah, marched to Beijing. And at that time, it was called Tatar City. You know, so it just goes on and on and on. You know, oh, the Sudan war conflict, 190,000 people dead. You know, 190 is like 190000. Syria's civil war by 2014, yeah, when it was in the media. We're talking about how they report things. That they reported it saying, there's been more than 190,000 people dead. How the hell do they know? Why does it have to be 19? Oh, yeah, look at this. It says, Chairman Mao Zedong, he built bunkers and tunnels underneath Beijing, yeah, 19 miles of space underneath the city. Oh, yeah, because Beijing's got an underneath city. So it just goes, oh, Charles Dickens, his Christmas Carol, December the 19th, it was published. It just goes on and on. Oh, it says that the United States had 190,000 soldiers in Taiwan, but in 1958. But today, Taiwan's military has got 190,000 soldiers strong military to fight the Chinese if they invade. Or the World War II Museum, 19,000 square feet. It just goes on and on and on. Then, oh, the United States entered the war, World War II. The army started with 190,000 soldiers. Yeah. By the end of the war, there was now 190,000 women in the army. Can you see? You can tell it's just a joke. It's just a joke.
The working hypothesis here, just briefly, would be that this is used to completely construct events and dates, or as a cover-up, or simply to have something real happen, and if the numbers don't match, just change them for the magic.
Yeah, now the thing is this. Now, the meaning of the number 19, I've put it in my books, right? And the Quran actually says that they want you to love them or worship them. Worship is the posh English word. Adore in Spanish, adora in Latin. It means that you should love them the most, trust them, believe them. That's why people now, they created fake elections, fake nation states. My books explains how they created the nation states. And then they, in the Middle East, like you mentioned Chechnya, Afghanistan, and all these other places, and there's Colombia, that what they're trying to do is destroy the countryside, cause conflicts, and force everybody to go living in the city area. That's why in Mexico and Colombia, it's the same rubbish, same like Afghanistan. Oh no, they're growing drugs in these places. Yeah, that's what they're doing. Yeah, so in other words, they're causing havoc, they're providing weapons, and they're just causing chaos to create urbanization. This is what happened in World War I and II. Now, another thing people don't realize during World War I and II is what they did with Europe's men. Yeah, they gave them alcohol. A lot of the men we're talking about were age 14, 15 in the army. That's why we had this alcohol culture, especially in Western Europe and America, because they were giving them alcohol, beer instead of water. Yeah. And many of them never even left the United States. What they did was they took lots of men and they said, you've got to join the army. They joined the army. They never left the United States. They were just sat in their army barracks or wherever in their army camps. And this meant that the economy had to run. And so even if my books explains how they destroyed the countryside and created urbanization. But during the war, they started a new game. What they did during the war was this. Now, the women then had to look after the families, and not just look after the families. In many countries like England, they separated the children, saying, hey, the children are going to die. We're going to have to move them out of the cities. So they separated them. Again, this was not the first time. So we're talking about World War I and II here. Then this meant that women had to work, support the men, save the men. You're going to have to work in the factories. You're going to have to work more. So this brought women into the workforce.
Even if it was not a real shortage, just to point this out, even if it wasn't a real shortage, because, you know, there's many guys coming forward now, one of them being William Toll. Not sure if you heard about him. He talks about Germany a lot. But one particular tidbit he mentioned when he was asked about the Second World War and what really happened, he also mentioned that most people didn't even leave their bases or something. But this would mean that enlisting the women in the war effort would actually have been just part of the ruse of making it seem as if the workforce is required when it maybe really actually wasn't, because many of them were just sitting around anyhow, just to pull them into the workforce.
Today. Have a look at the results today. When you go around Western Europe, half the women are single and living alone. Now, this means that we're using double the resources. Now, because they're single and living alone, we've created a society where it's become almost impossible to get married. I mean, married in the traditional sense. Yeah, you get married, a few years later, it's over. Or even a few months later, it's become a joke. Yes. Now, it's like the only people who are mentally capable of getting married now in huge numbers is basically in the Middle East, once again, are people who've had an Islamic upbringing or who've had an Orthodox Jewish upbringing. Yes, or maybe in the third world, some people who have not been through the brainwashing of the Western system can still handle a marriage. Or in the West, we're talking it's become that bad. The cheating, the divorces, many other things. You know, people getting remarried does not mean that they're married to the same person all their life. So what they did was they wanted to break the family system down. That has got something to do with why they created an education system in most countries that people have to go study in a different town or city to do in university. That was not by accident either, because I'm following right now what's happening in countries like Peru or in Algeria, yes, or in Indonesia. And I've noticed that somebody who's doing a business degree, yes, can do it in their own city, but for no reason they're going to go to another city. Yeah, and they're going to go, and when they go through the selection process, it will say, sorry, we couldn't find a place available. But all these things are done deliberately to separate families, to get people far away and things like this. So it's a long-term plan what they're doing. It's a long-term thing. What they've done is so that everybody's dependent on the people in power. And the people in power basically want you to believe them, to love them and worship them. Now, the Quran actually tells you the opposite. Now, I've just put a little bit of that number 19, yeah? But it's actually so bad that it's just ridiculous. I really don't know how to explain it. You know, it's just ridiculous. Like, for example, World War I, 200, this is how they say it, 250,000 Belgian refugees came to England. 19,000 of them went north. Yes, outside the London area. Oh, then it says in World War I, 19,000 Belgian soldiers were wounded. You know, it just goes on and on and on. But people don't realize, oh, yeah, Anne Frank, 19th of March, blah, 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 intimate conversation. It just goes on.
Her story was even proven bogus, no? The Anne Frank story, the diaries.
Yeah. So the main thing is, talking about how many women went to work during the war. It says 19 million women worked for wages during the war. We're just talking about women. I just had a look online, and it says 19 million women in the United States started to go to work for wages during the war. 19 million once again. Oh, yeah. And then it says they used propaganda. Yeah. Propaganda to mobilize women for World War II.
Right.
Yeah. These changes enabled women to work more. Yes. Blah, blah, blah. You know, so it just goes on and on. It's just, oh, yeah. It's not just in Europe. We're talking about in China and Japan. They're teaching 19 million non-combatant deaths in World War II. So it means that they're all together, because we can find the same mathematics in the other side of the world. Yeah. Or the bombing of Rome, 19th of July, Hitler meets Mussolini for the last time on the 19th. It just goes on and World War I, the first day of the war, 19,000 people dead. Whoa, on the first day. And it says it's the worst day in the British Army's history. That's the first day of World War I, 19,000 people dead. So I'm sure you could smell it by now. Anybody who says that they can't smell it is just, just talking rubbish. The Germans were in the Spanish Civil War. 19,000 Germans served in the Spanish Civil War. Oh, yeah. But they had 19,000 Luftwaffe Air Force personnel in Spain. It just goes on and on. It's just ridiculous. Oh, yeah. If you're going to go back to the Middle Ages, Frederick Barbarossa marching with the Crusaders to the Middle East. He had 190,000 soldiers as he passed through Belgrade. It just goes on and on. But people don't realize all these things. You know, it just goes on and on. You know, to talk about global warming, radiation, radioactive waste. The United States has dumped 190 cubic meters of radioactive waste. Yeah. But then if you go to the other side of the world in Russia, it says that 190,000 people reported radiation levels have gone up in Severodvinsk. It just goes on and on. Oh, then it says for a nuclear power station, you need 190,000 liters of water. Oh, then you come to Iran. Oh, they've got 19,000 centrifuges. It's just ridiculous. You know, it just goes on and on. It just goes on and on and on. Oh, then it says so far they've dropped 190,000 kilograms of material left by humans on the moon. It's just ridiculous. Don't know what to say. It's just ridiculous. John Lennon, his tooth fetched 19,000 British pounds at an auction. Yeah. It just goes in 2012. So the thing is, people will think John Lennon, his tooth, but they're not going to notice to put the 19,000 there. Oh, look at this. 19,000 mail bags of letters, yeah, crossed the ocean through the English Channel every day during World War I. Who the hell counted all this data? It just sounds like a joke. Oh, 19,000 black men served during the Civil War. It just sounds like a joke. It's just ridiculous. Oh, yeah, during the Civil War, the major battle, the Battle of Sharpsburg. Yes, 19,000 soldiers wounded. The Civil War. Oh, yeah, the race riots that started in 1919, you know, Ku Klux Klan, everything developed around that time, started on July the 19th. It just goes on and on and on. I really don't know how. Oh, the Sichuan earthquake in China, 2008, 19,000 school children died. Oh, yeah, the earthquake started 19 kilometers or miles underground. That's where it started, where the cracks started. You know, it just goes on and on. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it just goes on and on. I'm sure you've practically got the hint.
Oh yeah,
by now that,
for sure. Yeah, and I also I read the books, and all I can say, I'm not revealing it now. Everyone should check out the books. But just to mention, anyone with the most basic numerological skills can understand what the 19 is about.
Yes, but now the thing is, for example, most people don't bother reading the 9/11 Commission report for September the 11th. That is not important to us. But what people don't realize is that that commission report is going to be read by people after 50 years. Same like the Nuremberg trial, when it happened, people just watched it on television. But it's today that people who are studying the Holocaust are actually reading it. And there's 19,000 here and there, or the number 19 here, there, and everywhere in the Nuremberg trials and in half the historical reports of what happened in Nazi Germany. So it's people who are reading it today. But the people at that time didn't read it. Same like now, we're not reading the 9/11 Commission report. But if you go through it, you're going to think, what the hell is this? 19 hijackers. Then at 8:19 a.m., they realized it got hijacked. Then at 9:19 a.m., they're going to take action. Sounds pathetic. Yeah. There's more 19s during that incident. It's just a joke during that, you know, first 24 hours, that anybody who goes through it is going to think they're just talking rubbish. Yeah, if they're making phone calls to report it, yeah, at what minute are you going to actually say that they actually reported it? Was the phone call started at 9:19 a.m. or did they make the actual report? Because they've got to say hello first. Did they actually make the full report by 9:20 a.m. or did they deliberately choose 9:19? Or was there no report whatsoever? Is it all just a fake? So I'm saying, the amazing thing is this: how did the Quran know this? That's another thing. We're talking about a book from St. Petersburg in Russia. Whatever the history of this person called the Prophet Muhammad is, yeah, you know, and wherever the book came from, that's a different issue to do with theology and your personal faith. If you're going to say, hey, it's the book of God, no, it's not. That's your personal thing. But we've got to ask the question, how did that book know? And another thing is, why does the rest of the world not know? Then that, when we ask the question, why does the rest of the world not know about this book? Then we can clearly see why we've got this so-called Taliban, the so-called, you know, anti-Turk, whatever, or anti-Islamic, whatever that's going around. And if you go through my profile, you'll notice that there's that when you go through these so-called organizations that turned up during the Capitol protests and the storming of the Capitol building, you'll notice the number 19 here, there, and everywhere. That soon when you go through it, and many people have done video analysis, and they said thousands of people who were there on the front line of those protests, that they're all part of organizations that were created and controlled by the US state. Yeah. basically they're all, you know, bogus protesters. So now what we've got here is we've got all these so-called, I remember in the last 20 years, we used to see all these groups marching around Europe saying, no mosques here, or stop the Islamization of Europe,
Right.
blah,
Very
blah,
popular,
blah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Their groups, all of them, go through it all, 19 here, that 19 there, that it's pathetic. Like for one of them, what's that woman's name? Taylor something, or something Taylor, pop star. I've forgotten her name.
Taylor Swift?
I put her on my... Yeah, that's it. Yeah. She's supposed to be on one of these groups, you know, they call them neo-Nazi groups. Oh, yeah, the way the media reported it, 19,000 followers or 19,000 Instagram people like it or something like that. I've put it down. I've put it down on my Facebook page. But the thing is, on the Taylor Swift thing, I've only put a few things. You can go through, imagine like there's it's on CNN or DW Germany tomorrow, or France 24 tomorrow, or the BBC, that they mention Taylor Swift tomorrow. If they mention her for 3 minutes, somewhere in the middle, somebody's going to smell it when they say, her dog did this and that. She put this photograph on. It's controversial. 19,000 people did not like it. But nobody's going to notice it. People are going to pay attention to the dog.
Yeah.
But they won't notice that in the middle, that the presenter just said 19,000 people did not like it, or something like that. But the thing is, why are they using this number 19? Because the number 19 has got something to do with the name of God. Yeah. And it's to do with, they want you to worship them. And the Quran actually tells you this full story. So that means that the Quran is something that we can't ignore. Is it with the amount of number 19s? If this 19 thing was not there, then people can say, hey, oh, no, it's just bogus. But you've had a look yourself. Is it too much, this 19 thing? Is it just too much?
Yeah, well, definitely. And knowing how some individuals with certain ideologies operate, it only makes sense that anywhere you can, for whatever your purpose exactly may be, you're just going to put it in.
Yeah, there's one thing to do with when we're talking about organizations, but when we're talking about the global media, it could be you know, China's CCTV, or it could be Japan's NHK. I know these media channels because I travel and I've got used to them. Or it could be Russia Today, RT. It could be you know, CNN, CBN News. It could be Yahoo News. It could be just local newspapers, you know, like the New York Times or the Daily Telegraph or Le Monde in Paris. It could be DW News in Germany. All of these people are using the same data with this number 19 somewhere in there for major events. Now, the thing is, if they're all using it and they're all saying the same message and the same news, it means that it must be organized. Now, if it wasn't, if they were using it in opposing ways with, you know, conflicting data, then it will mean that, hey, they are all against each other. But because they're all showing it in a uniform way, yes, and they're all saying the same data, then it means that they're all together. Yes? If they're all using the same data, like, for example, this is impossible. I'll show you. It just sounds ridiculous. Iran has got 19,000 nuclear centrifuges. The United States says that Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism on the 19th of January. On the day the nuclear talks start, the Iranian currency drops to 19,000 per dollar. Then this nuclear compliance deal ended on the 19th of May. Yes, then the Iranian prime minister or president turns around and says, hey, this nuclear deal is no good. We need 19,000 megawatts from our power stations. And this demand is 19 times higher than the current output. Yeah. And then at the same time, the United States, you know, FBI, CIA say, we've just confiscated $190,000 of nuclear equipment that was going to be smuggled into Iran. Blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on and on. It just sounds ridiculous. Then they say the oil exports dropped to 19,000 barrels a day because of the UN sanctions, which were enforced by the United States, the former sanctions, which were reinforced on the 19th of September. It just sounds like a joke. Yeah, but nobody, oh yeah, and they're saying this has affected Iran's economy and their GDP is only $19,000 GDP per capita. Yeah, but now Iran's going to survive because they've just signed a new contract, even with the sanctions of 190,000 barrels of oil to India. Yes, and because the Iranian businesses are suffering, many people decided to go online, and 190,000 new businesses have just come online. And so now Iran is angry and it's threatening the United States. And it says, we will target your 190,000 US troops in the area. Can you not smell it? It's a bit too much. Yes.
Too much indeed. I do have a bonus question in relation to all the history. Just, it's another one of these off-the-cuff things, but just to anyone, and I've investigated this now for years and watched all kinds of things, but still, there's so many loose ends anywhere with all the relabeling and the confusion. And I know we didn't get it down for the last conversation. So is there anything that you can say about what is generally called Gypsies, Roma and Sinti, or whatever other denomination they have? Because it's quite interesting that even within the modern nation states, you have these, some of them landless, some of them already settled, but always kind of having an issue with this particular group.
Now, if you live in Central Europe, let's say Hungary, a lot of the Roma have got mixed race. Some have got darker skinned, some have got light skinned. So we can see they've intermarried with people.
Right.
Now, where I am in Manchester, in England, we've got gypsies here, but they look like Northern Europeans, Germanic people. Yes. So then you've got gypsies that if you went to Russia, to Saratov city is in central Russia, central Western Russia. Yeah, you've got gypsies there that just look like French people in appearance. So when we're talking about gypsies, we are not talking about a group of people. And gypsies sounds, and many people have said, is Egyptians.
Right.
Yes, that's another thing. So now some of them claim that they came from India. Yes, their ancestry. Then a lot of these maps from the Renaissance, which many people say are forgeries, made in the 18th century, actually showed that India is actually Egypt to North Africa. Yes. That's another strange thing. So now the strange thing is we cannot label them as a race because we've got gypsies in Scandinavia who are, who just look like, Russians. Yes. And then we've got gypsies that are in Russia. So it means that it was a term or a label that people just decided to call people who did not urbanize, come into city areas, because they're one of the last few people who did not want to come into the city areas. Yes, that they managed to survive, especially in mountainous regions in Eastern Europe, like in Romania and in Hungary and in other places where it was difficult to get them out. But the thing is, in Eastern Europe, they found it a bit more difficult. Yeah, no, they found it difficult to stay in the mountains, so they eventually came down. But now regarding the gypsies, yes, if we go to look at the Balkans, south from Hungary, yes, now all these so-called gypsies are all mysteriously Muslims. That's another strange thing. This is something that people don't realize. When you go to Bulgaria, there's gypsies there. They just happen to be Muslims. So now the Bulgarian government doesn't know if they should call them gypsies or Turks. If they follow Islam, then they just call them Turks. But if they've lost touch with Islam, then they call them gypsies. Yes. So that's another long story. Yes, it's another long story. So when you talk about gypsies, we can't define them as a race. It's impossible because we've got people who are so-called gypsies that are in Northern Europe who don't look anything like in physical appearance to the gypsies that are seen in Eastern Europe and the Balkans. But then we've got gypsies that are in Russia that don't look anything like the gypsies that are in the Balkans. I hope that answers your question.
Right, yeah, partially. I mean, at the same time, from what I understand, they have at least partially a similar language with Romanes. I mean, even here there's differing groups. So generally, how you would define them is that it was just a relabeling of those that chose to remain landless or at least not move into the city.
I'll give you an example now. For example, the word, there's a word called Arabelles. They say it's Latin, but we know it's not Latin. We're not stupid. The word Arab-el just means Arab and Allah. Yes? And this was the name that was called, the people in France, the common people were known as Arabelle or Arabal. Now, the strange thing is, when you go to Latin America, the people there were given the same name by the Spanish Inquisition, and the people in the United States were called Arabels or Arabals, the natives. So you said that lady is calling them Moorish, but then what is the definition of Moorish or Arabel? So it's like, for example, it's like, you know, the meaning changes. Like the meaning for Arabel today in America just means somebody who's poor, or even a gypsy. Yes, that's what they'll call them in Mexico or in California or in Texas. So when we're saying gypsy today, it could mean something else. Yes, it's like, for example, this is hard to believe, but the Prophet Muhammad and his followers were known as the Christians. Yes. Oh, they were in Europe. These people who did not accept the Trinity, they were just known as Christians. Then eventually they became known as the Muslims. Yes, the ones who were outside Europe. So the meaning changes.
You say the differentiating factor was that they did not accept the Trinity, and those would be the ones called
Muslims.
Muslims, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So now, why was it called? Islam is a Western word. Yeah, is a Western word. So let's pretend we're not English. If we're not English, then the word is salam. Salam is just short for peace. That these people are followers of peace. That's what it was called. And they were called followers of peace because when Christ met people, he just said salam, hello. Salam was the word for like hello. Yes. So he said that, Christ said that every single time. Not only Christ, all the Jewish people still say it today. But because modern standardized Hebrew, which was modified in the 1880s, has created a pronunciation for the modern state
Shalom.
That is known as Israel.
I see.
They say Shalom. It's because the pronunciation has been created. Same like the word for God in the Bible, it repeatedly says the word Allah. But people are pronouncing it El or Ella on purpose because they are telling them to pronounce it like that. But the Bible doesn't say that. So we have another problem there.
Yeah, and even in German, you may be aware that alles, everything, also is really similar to Allah, everything, alles. Yeah.
Yeah, no, for example, there's some things in history that you're going to find difficult to hide. Even in 200 years' time, they'll probably find it difficult to hide that Spanish was a major language, English was a major language, China was a major deliverer of all the goods around the world. Some things that you can't hide. Now, there's some things that they failed to hide was that Arabic, the language of the Arabic Quran, not modern Arabic. Same like modern Hebrew is not same like the Hebrew in many of the manuscripts. Now the thing is, what do you call it? That Arabic was actually the global language. They can't hide that. It's difficult. It's because, for example, there's a language called Ladino that was used throughout Latin America just only about 80 years ago, 70 years ago, before people started going to school. And in school, they're teaching them modern Spanish.
Right.
Yeah. If you have a look at all the letters that were written in Ladino language, let's say from Chile in the 1930s, Argentina, there's no difference between that and Arabic. But I'm going to put this in a new book to show how they created modern languages. Now, when somebody looks at Sanskrit, yeah, if you look at Hebrew, modern Hebrew, it looks nothing like Ladino. But Ladino looks the same like Arabic, and Arabic looks the same like so-called Hebrew 3 centuries ago, almost like it's the same language. That's the only differentiation. Why people will say it's different is because these so-called historians will say, let's say you write a letter in English with your handwriting, then I write one with my handwriting. Then they're going to say, oh no, Raphael's handwriting is different. That's not English. That's a language. They'll just give it a name and say, that's Australian, and David's from England, so that's English. So, oh no, they'll just classify it as 2 different languages. That's what they've done on purpose. It's like I'm somebody, it's because I've been studying many languages from a young age, international languages. Yeah, it's because I studied French for 5 years in high school, then 2 more in university, and I studied Spanish for 5 years. So I was naturally into languages. Then, because I really wanted to travel, I thought, hey, I want to become an international person. So I studied Chinese, Japanese, yeah, Arabic, Indian, what's the other language? Turkish, Russian. You know, I studied quite a few. I studied German for a year, but didn't manage to learn much. I'm not going to lie about it, but I did study it for a year.
But it's certainly obvious, just to briefly mention, even with just mainly, in my case, Romanic language, so English, German, French, all the parallels are obvious, and then it gets really strange with all the Middle English and so on, how they try to tell you. Yeah, it's difficult to put together.
They tell us something, but where is the proof? Their proof is they're going to show us books from printing presses.
Yeah, exactly, which are almost all reframed and rewritten with the stamp of the Jesuits, even if on the Bello Tartarico, because I always wondered with many medieval languages.
Nobody has a look at who the Jesuits are. The Jesuits mysteriously formed in France, in Paris, right? Let me. When you hear this, you're going to think, "What the hell?" It's actually, well, you know, because I don't want to insult the viewers, or I would normally say, "What the?" Yeah, it's the Jesuits formed in Paris in the 15th, 16th century. That's the date, but they could have formed in the 17th century. Around that time, yes, to say after that, 200 years later, to say that in Paris, they dug out the graves of everybody, yeah, and they put them, you know, in the Paris, they call them catacombs, you know, under the city. And they say there's millions of bones, yeah, mysteriously bones, and they're neatly organized, yeah,
right.
That almost like it must have taken thousands of people to do that. And you know how the average person is going to react if they were supposedly Christian, or even Muslim. Muslims and Christians are similar, or even if they were Jewish. Nobody in their right state of mind is going to get hold of all these bones and start burying them. Now, the strange thing is, these type of bones, like in Paris, that are under the city, we're talking about the Jesuits, I'll get back to them. They're found in many places: Poland, Hungary, Italy, Spain, Germany. You'll find them, Czech Republic, many other places. That you'll find these strange places with thousands of bones. Rome, yes, for example. So now the thing is, what the hell's going on here? So now what nobody seems to mention is that when the Jesuits formed, the Jesuits' number one objective was to convert the Muslims in the world to Christianity. In those days, convert didn't mean convert. It really meant convert or kill him. Kill that guy, man. Kill him. Yeah, have you got your weapons? They killed anybody who is not going to accept that Jesus Christ died. Yes. Now, the Quran tells you the story. Now, this is where the Quran comes in. The Quran says they didn't kill him. Yeah, they're lying about it. Yeah, simply. So now the Quran and the Torah has got some problems with it. But let's get to what Islam says. Islam says that what happened is that there was a group of people. Yes, there were Jewish priests. The Quran says it. The Bible says this also. This part is still there. And Anatoly Fomenko confirms that, showing that when Slavic emerged, Arabic was the language of religion in Russia. And he says that for the Slavs, in the Slavic language, the word Jew meant priest, Judah. It didn't represent the children of Israel. Now, the Quran also differentiates that. And so the thing is, it says that there was a group of people, yeah, that they wanted Jesus Christ dead. And because they thought they killed him, that's why they then realized they didn't kill him. But then they wanted him dead because Christ came to fulfill the law. Fulfill the law means that, hey, Christ prayed. There's no difference between the way Christ prays and the way the Muslims pray today. If you actually open up the Bible, washing their heads, hands and feet, and then bowing on the floor, facing the direction of a building or somewhere that they say is the house of God. And the Quran says it doesn't matter which way you pray, east or west, but just do it that way for convenience. Yeah, so that you know what you're doing. It practically says that in Islam and in the Quran. So we don't see any difference between what Christ did and modern Islam. Yes. So now the thing is, it says that these people did not like the law of God. So what they wanted to do was cancel the law, make sure that nobody followed, because they want you to worship. Yeah. You call it Satan, call it aliens, call them whatever. They want you to worship them. So what they said was Christ died and your sins are forgiven. So therefore, the law is no longer valid. That's what it was all about. And that's why when the old law is dead...
Shifting of responsibility, just like today everywhere. It's interesting, yeah. Go on.
Yeah. So that's what the Quran says it was about. So the Quran says that, and the thing is, it says that somebody else was there and it wasn't Christ who got crucified. Now, if you have a look at they're going to say these documents are centuries old. But Anatoly Fomenko and other researchers, even me, I personally have found in my research, they're not centuries old. These documents are probably only a few centuries old. And in the oldest documents of the so-called New Testament, it says that that the other guy who was there at the trial of Jesus Christ, he was called Jesus as well. That this guy was called the Son of the Father or the Son of God, and the other one was called Jesus Christ the Messiah. So the Quran says that the other guy got crucified. The other guy, it was the other guy. And what happened is that after Jesus Christ, the Sanhedrin, or however you want to pronounce it, the Jewish priests, the businessmen, the bankers, everybody else, they got together. Yes, they got together. And what they did was they thought, we've got to fight against this movement. Because what happened is after the Torah came, they had taken power. And they'd managed to already modify many things and put that so that their interests came first within the religion of the Torah. Call it Judaism, but that religion at that time was not Judaism. It was just the religion of the Torah. So then Christ came. He came for the lost sheep of Israel. Yes. And it wasn't just Israel. It was all the people. So Christ came for everybody. So then there's all these millions of people following Christ. They didn't believe the crucifixion. So then these people declared war on these so-called Christians. Now they declared war on these Christians. And then in the Bible, it says, after Jesus Christ is going to come the Spirit of truth. And whatever he says, blah, 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 you should follow it. Now, if you go to the other side of the world, the character of Buddha, even Anatoly Fomenko and other people have said is a fraud. It's basically identical to Christ. He even says that the next Buddha who's coming, he's the one who's going to guide you. Yeah. So now what happens is this. Yeah. So everybody was waiting in the world, and these people who opposed Christ, the Jewish leadership. The Jewish leadership at the time, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, whatever names they've given them, they declared war on the followers of Christ. The followers of Christ had gained so much power. And then they suddenly had a leader. And that leader was the Prophet Muhammad. That's why the Prophet Muhammad was known as a Christian. And his knights were known as the Knights Templar. But they've changed history and said it the other way around, saying, no, the Knights Templar fought the Muslims. So now coming back to the Paris catacombs, what happened is this. If you read through the history of the Knights Templar, and the Cathars and the Inquisitions, what they did was they burnt people and collected their bones. That's what they did as a punishment. Are you beginning to see what the catacombs are all about?
Yes, all the heretics basically now buried underground.
Yeah. So what they did was they burnt them, they collected their bones, simple as. So, and that was, Anatoly Fomenko says that was around the 17th century, or, just before the time of the so-called Napoleonic times. So as you can see, it's beginning to make sense, whereas they are telling you some bogus history saying, oh no, there was no space in the graves, so we dug out millions of graves. We dug them all out. We cleaned them, made them clean from graves, and wiped them and put all the bones together. That doesn't make sense if you're going to get bones out from underground, which has got soil and dirt on and everything for many centuries, and then you're going to polish them, clean them, and then put them together. Are you beginning to see what I'm saying? And then dig out Paris to bury them under the buildings and everything else under Paris. It just doesn't make sense. So have you got that part?
Indeed. So, and just in general reference to the idea of the manipulation of history, I'm sure you have heard of the so-called Mandela effect. the idea that
Yes.
certain things change retrospectively, just because
now the thing is this.
Yes, go on.
Okay, the Mandela effect and other things about your thoughts and its influence. This is where the number 19 comes in. Yes, or why are they going to use that number? Because that number represents a word and a name. It's in my books what it represents, the alpha and the omega. Yes, it's not the alpha and the omega. Yeah, my books explains it clearly. So they're using that because the name of God has got power. The alpha and the omega represents the name of God. So that's why they're putting 19 this, 19 that everywhere, because they know that that has got, you know, a creative effect. Yeah, that it affects things. Yes, and it affects the way you think. And now there is a secret to do with this. Now, everybody is going to talk about the Kabbalah, blah, blah, blah. All these people are talking and nobody is bothering to even say for 1 minute the word Kaaba is, they're going to say is Hebrew. But we cannot find an ancient Hebrew language. We can't seem to find it. That most of the Jewish books, yeah, from a few centuries ago are written in a handwriting which is identical to Arabic. Or they're going to give it strange names. But anybody who knows, you know, handwritings or goes through them, I'm going to put it in the future book because it's just so simple to see. Yeah, what do they call these things? They call it cursive Hebrew or solitreo Hebrew,
or pseudo-Kufic script in case of.
Yeah, now you're beginning to see it. I'll give you an example now. It's same like saying I'm using Times New Roman or I'm using, you know, some other font. So it's just a different handwriting, but they're going to say it's a different language. I'm going to draw it out in books because I've been through the Hebrew alphabet and Arabic alphabet since the age of 15. And I've been through them all and I thought it's just a joke, different handwritings. So I went through many of these things, even for Sanskrit. Sanskrit is actually Arabic, but a different handwriting with lines on it. It's ridiculous. And then when you look at the way Mandarin developed, Anatoly Fomenko shows, is just a joke. Just a joke. It was a non-existent language. It's not thousands of years old in China. And if you have a look at it, it supposedly came from Mongolian script because they say the the Mongols, it was theirs. Now, the thing is, we can't seem to find these Mongols. All we could find is Beijing was called Tatar City, which is one of the worst conspiracies I've ever heard. Nobody has ever heard of Tatar City, that Beijing was Tatar City before 1900. Nobody's even heard of this. Nobody even knows. Chinese weren't even allowed there, that they migrated to the north. Almost nobody knows about it. It's that in itself is one of the biggest conspiracies. And then these people won't even allow Chinese in their cities. Yeah. So now the thing is, the way that they've got their alphabet and their writing, that was Arabic in itself. But they're saying, no, it's Mongolian. Mongolian looks identical to Arabic, but modified Arabic. Then we've got Latin. So when you say these Roman languages, what is the definition of Roman? It's like, for example, they say the word vaccine comes from the word Latin word vacca. They're going to tell you that that's from an old language. But then we can't seem to find a Latin language in Europe. All the books in Europe, yeah, before and around the Renaissance were in Arabic. Yeah, and there's too many remains of Arabic coins, Arabic writing here and there that we can't deny it. And then the word vaccine, they say, come from vacca, the Latin word. But then they're going to say, oh no, that's from the Hebrew word, similar, yeah, vacca. But then in Arabic language, it's also vacca. You understand? So then they're going to say, oh no, it's Latin. Where's the proof that it's Latin? Who said it's not from Hebrew? Who said it's not from Arabic? Okay, what is the difference between Latin Romanesque or the original Latin and Arabic? Which came first? Who was reading what language? If Latin was so widespread, how come nobody could speak this Latin language? Even back in the days. Yeah? Why were the books in Arabic? What is the difference between Arabic and Ladino? And Ladino is supposed to be a mixture of Romance, Spanish, and Arabic. But then if you go to some other websites or other books, they'll say, no, it's a mixture of Romance, Spanish, and Hebrew. Then you'll say, how do you know this word's Hebrew and not Arabic? Or how do you know this is Arabic and not Hebrew? So, but then what makes it simple is, if you go all over the world, because we're looking at a global civilization here, then you cannot bring Hebrew into Tatar City. It's clearly Arabic. then you can't bring Hebrew into Manila in the Philippines because we've got no Jewish presence there. And they're using similar words. Then it's obviously Arabic. So that's how we found in the Mayan language. Many people have had a study of it. And some people are going to say, oh, Mayan, ancient Mayan, all these people, they were related to the Hebrews. Ah, they're the lost tribes of Israel. That's because they want you to think that, because they've made sure that people are so anti-Islamic, anti-Muslim, nobody will think for 1 minute, hey, that's Arabic. And then they've made you think that Hebrew and Arabic is two different languages, or originally was. In the same way that, can you imagine, after 500 years, they're going to be telling people that American, Canadian, and Australian was 3 different languages. Yeah. Can you imagine if somebody said that? That's what they've done. Hebrew and Arabic was not even 2 different languages, nor was Latin. And then if you have a, I'm going to draw diagrams of it in a future book, that the Cyrillic, script that's used in Eastern Europe, and it came from Greek, that is just modified Arabic. That's all it is. Or then if you want to say, for the sake of, being an anti-Islamist, let's say, okay, it's modified Hebrew. But then you can't say the word Hebrew because that language was the language of the rabbi, the masters, the educated teachers. That's why it was called Arabi in the first place. Arabic, Arabi, that's why it was called Arabi, the language of the Arabs or the rabbis. It meant the educated people. But today they've made people believe that Arab means a race. No, it actually just meant educated people or teachers or professors or masters. That's all it meant.
Yeah, makes sense.
Let's leave it at that. I'm sure you've got enough information. I'll probably have a new book soon, specifically on the number 19. But there's enough books out there now for people to figure things out.
Indeed.
Yeah. And before I wrote the books and before I published the number 19 thing, even I was afraid to openly say, hey, the Quran actually says this, the Quran actually says that. Now I don't care. Yeah, it's because Anatoly Fomenko, what they did was, in the end, when he wrote everything down and he said the Quran's got a different timeline, and he shows that, hey, the Quran is showing Christ didn't live at that period of time, nor did Moses. They lived in this period of time, etc. They labeled him a Russian nationalist. Yeah, I'm not pro or for or against anybody. Now, if somebody's going to say, hey, the Quran has got that alternative version of history, yes, it shows that they're challenging this new world system.
Right.
That is, yes, they're challenging them. Now, if somebody is going to ask me from a religious perspective, this religion, that religion, I am not talking about religion here. I'm not trying to say, hey, you follow this religion or that, or support this or that. What I'm trying to say is that this is something so big in history that our side of the world has been told so many lies that it's a joke. And mysteriously, that book is telling you to wake up. And that book is followed by an organized, over 1 billion people. And they're on the other side. Now, the thing is, if they're on the other side, it means there must be something. There is something wrong. That these people don't want to integrate when they come into Europe. They want to preserve this language that's in this book. And they're telling us, hey, no, this was the original language. And they're telling us, oh, no, you have a look. That history is a lie. But no, we turn around and seem to look down on them. We do in the West. We seem to turn around and think, oh, they're backwards, they're uneducated. We're educated because we memorized and we got brainwashed and learned this history. So who's the stupid one here? In their book, it tells you, don't just believe it. Go and do research. Go and think. In the West, we're told that, oh, no, the historians have done all the research. This is the truth. That's it. It's set history. Now, if you speak against it, even online, oh, we've got fact checkers these days. Yes. So you can't even challenge it, even if you investigate it and question it. Oh, no, there's fact finders, tellers. They'll delete your post or they'll delete you offline. Yeah. Or what they're doing in Europe and the West now is what they started in China 10 years ago. Fact stuff and facts, this and that, whereby they just blocked everything. Now, what people don't realize is, people don't realize within the next 10 or 20 years, right now, there's groups, TARTÁRIA, this, that, blah, 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 truth seekers, all of these things, the way things are going, even those things will not be around in 20 years' time, because that's exactly how it happened in China. It took them around 20 years to totally shut down every form of opposition, that you've totally got to accept this history, that the only people who can investigate and question are people who are with the authorities or the people in power, so-called archaeologists and historians and media professionals. Nobody else will be allowed to say anything. If you say anything, they're going to say, finding, it's found that, hey, you've said a lie. No, it's so serious. There is going to be nothing left.
It is absolutely serious, and I definitely agree with you that is the plan. However,
it's increasing. It's increasing. And the thing is, people are running out of time. So I've put these things there. Now, if people want to, even if they download and save things, we're talking about in 50 years' time, 100 years' time, I give permission. People can print my books out. They could do whatever. They can do whatever. Now, a big thing about the Quran is, what the Quran has successfully done is that from generation to generation for centuries, they've managed to keep the opposition by denying this world order system, by saying, hey, no, you're just a bunch of liars. No, this is what you're doing. And they've managed to preserve it. So my books, even with the downloading and everything, and Anatoly Fomenko's books and a few other researchers, people might be able to keep things, for 10, 20, 30 years. But that Quran has created an opposition system. And that Quran is following the system whereby it's saying Muhammad was the leader of the Christians. Oh, they've changed history now to say, oh no, it's a different religion. He was the leader of the Christian resistance. And he was the renaissance and the rebirth of the Christians, whereby the followers of Christ fought back. But now they've made it out like, oh, he was, messing around with children, things like this, fake history. That Anatoly Fomenko has even shown that the Jesuits wrote that. Even I've had a look at it. A lot of it is just disgusting. Do you know what they've put down and said? That this Prophet Muhammad was turning around saying that goats breathe through their ears. How, and they said this is an Islamic statement. These things have entered Islamic books. So it means that these books have been modified and changed. And to do with this, like, if, for example, there is the question of 666 and revelation. Now, many people have been reading the Bible and it looks like the information is incomplete. Now, if God wanted to send a message, what type of a God is that who is going to send an incomplete message whereby people have to guess? But what people didn't realize is, what if they've modified and deleted most of the information to do with the 666, and the other 80% has survived within Islam? That's why they don't want you to look there. That's something I'll let people who listen to this conversation, anyone with a brain, and think, aha, what if the rest of the information is still alive there? Wasn't Muhammad, this Prophet Muhammad, the leader of the Christians? Then that means that this information may have survived there. I'm going to write about it, actually. So let people look for it there. It's because they've made sure that no one's going to look there. No one's going to look there. Indeed. Because do you know what people do? I'm from Manchester. And what you see is when people think, the Bible's full of rubbish, full of lies, then people think, I'm going to be a Buddhist.
Yeah, exactly.
And or they'll think, okay, I'll have a look at Hare Rama, Hare Krishna. They sound a bit off it, but a bit crazy, but I'll have a look. But Islam, no. The Quran, no. Okay, say no, and then you don't find out the rest of the 666. Say no and sit there and thinking, oh no, the information's there, and guess the rest. Oh, same like I've noticed, I've done experiments on the Facebook and giving out books. When you put a picture there or a video, people are listening to videos, and looking at pictures. But for the details, many people are going to be listening to this conversation. For the details, they're going to have to read. They're going to have to make a bit of an effort. To do with the number 19, there's no point in doing a video or talking, because they've got to actually look at it, the data themselves. It's like one person put a comment on my Facebook and said, hey, can't you just make a video? You can't. There's too much information, and it's like you can't explain half that information.
Well,
People
otherwise anyone can take a look and they can make their own documentary videos. It doesn't have to be up to you, you know. Everyone can bring their own effort.
Videos now, a lot of them haven't got any factual evidence behind it. They're giving their own ideas, opinions, assumptions, but nobody's coming up with actual fact. Now, Anatoly Fomenko was respected because he said the data was a lie and they're using mathematical patterns, and he showed it with graphical analysis.
Yeah.
That he has done something amazing. Now, in my books, I've actually shown that the number 19, it's a joke. It's throughout the space agent's history. It's throughout the history. You could find it in the science of the way the Earth functions and everything. They've put 19 here and there, that it's a joke. Yeah. And I've put many internet posts to show that it's a joke. Yeah. So I don't know. Personally, some people have said, hey, David, the information that you've put out, you should go down in history, like Anatoly Fomenko, because nobody else has come out with that. Do you know when I first started putting those posts about the number 19, within a week, there were some people who started putting on other things about the number 19 to divert people, mislead people. So soon a misinformation campaign is going to start. Same like with the TARTÁRIA groups, they've been hijacked. It's a joke. When I look at these groups, I still see them now. Most of the posts are a joke. Oh, see this on top of this building. It might have done this. It might have done that. Nobody's even asking a question saying, why is there so much copper on the roofs? Is there a single historical document from the past that explains this, the copper, or mentions it? Not many, but the Arabic Quran does. Yeah, but nobody's going to bother to have a look at that. Yeah, I've not written about that in my books. Yeah, I've not written about that in my books, but I hope to do so soon. But the thing is, you know, the Quran talks about it. So that is another reason why you've got to carry on this war against Islam. This war against Islam was here 50 years ago. You know, the Iranian Revolution, Ayatollah Khomeini, the bad news, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the 6-day war, the Muslims, blah, blah, blah. It was going on. But the anti-Islamic Islamic thing has been going on for centuries. That almost throughout history, or these historical documents that we've got from the Jesuits, is just anti-Islamic. And the Jesuits, their number one objective was to kill Islam. Oh, and they're based in France. And then within 100 years, yeah, according to the official timeline, the dating, which Fomenko has shown to be wrong, but it shows that their men were working in Western Europe. Yeah, but weren't they supposed to be trying to do things and create documents to convert Muslims? What sort of Muslims are in Germany, Holland, and France, and England, where they were operating? You see what I mean? Yes. Yeah. But nobody is going to have a look at that. Nobody is going to think for 1 minute saying their number one objective was to get rid of Islam and convert Muslims. Who were these Muslims that were trying to convert in Western Europe? If there is no Islamic history there. And then we've got the Knights Templar, which is so big. The Knights of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. The Knights Templar is so big. King Arthur, these other legends and everything in Western Europe and America. Yeah. And their leader was the Prophet Muhammad. Well, many of them mysteriously, fluently spoke the language of the Arabic Quran. How could they have learnt that living in France, in England, in Holland? It doesn't make sense. In Scotland, in Wales. The history doesn't make sense. But no, they're going to turn around and say, they went to the Crusades. They were there for about a year or two, the language. I've known so many people from England who went to live and work in other countries, and still they can't learn another language in a year or two. Because these days travel is common. Still they can't. They learn about 5-10 sentences. You know what I mean? And they're telling us, oh no, these Knights Templar mysteriously spoke Arabic. Oh yeah, and they didn't believe in the Trinity. They believed that Christ was a prophet. That sounds like Islam. They're Christians. And wasn't Islam Christianity? Yes. So it's actually the same thing, but just a new title. Yeah, just a new title. You know, that's all it is. You know. Anyway, let's leave it at that, and we'll talk some other time. I'm sure there's enough there for you to reflect on. Now, the question of, is the Quran a religious document, and is it from God or not? That is a religious question. Me, as a researcher in history, what it looks like is that true history is on the side of the Quran. That's what it looks like. Now, to do with religion, where you're going to go after you die, where you go before, where you came from, that is a matter of faith and something speculation at the moment. You know, I haven't got the evidence for that. I don't know. I'm not going to make it up. I don't know what's going to happen to you or to me when we die, or if we're going to live again, or whatever's going to happen. Now, that is something else. But to do with history, it looks like the Quran is on the side of that person who was called Jesus Christ. My book known as Jesus Christ, that actually goes through the full story, what's as it is written in the so-called Gospels, and the original copies, you could go through it. Yeah, you can find them online, and mysteriously it matches the version of events that's written in the Quran. Yeah, so it's like another surprising thing is these Muslims that are in Europe and America. I don't know why they're not picking up on these issues. Aren't we told on the television Islam is trying to convert everybody? Right. If they are, then why aren't they telling the world? They're in France, they're in Germany, they're in Austria, they're in Canada, Australia.
It seems many are not as acutely aware of those particular points as you are. It seems more be like a subcultural thing. That might be one. But
another thing is that we're told in the media that they want to take over the world and convert everybody. They don't seem to be bothering.
Right.
So it's not exactly what the media is saying. So it's clearly a lie. Because if they really wanted to and they're making an extra effort to convert people, they would be going through these points themselves. Now, if I found it just by reading the book, then I'm sure that they would have found it, you know. Yeah. So Islam is not what they've told people it is. Yeah. Or there is modern Islam. They've created these fake books, fake whatever, that even Muslims are following those things. Right. People have got to be careful of. I'm saying that the Quran as a historical document, yeah, when it comes down to it, and the history that's in the Bible and the history that we found in Western so-called historical books, the Quran actually challenges them, and the history doesn't match with what they are saying. Yeah, and the buildings, you know, that are in the middle of nowhere. We've got Gothic churches that just seem impossible, that they're built with horses and donkeys. Like, for example, I put down a cathedral that says they built it with a few hundred people, which just sounds ridiculous in the middle of nowhere. You know, many cathedrals like that, you know, throughout Europe and in other places around the world. So it's just ridiculous, the sort of history they've given. Yeah. Anyway, let's leave it at that, Raphael. Yeah.
Thank you talk some very much.
And my next book, I hope, is finished next month.
Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. We greatly appreciate it, and the truth shall prevail. Thank you very, very much.
I hope so. Yeah. Okay. Take care. Yeah. Good. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Bye.